à-bas-le-ciel.
Hey guys, I don't normally make videos addressed to health and fitness and exercise. If you don't want to watch a video of that kind, close the window now. This is an unusual video for this channel. I think there are some good reasons why someone who is not an expert would share their experience or their perspective. I think one of the interesting contrasts between snake oil salesmen and people giving sincere advice, but sometimes you see it even within the same source of advice, is actually the promise that these things can be or should be effortless, that you can lose weight effortlessly, that you can gain strength or you can gain muscle mass effortlessly. And I think the main value in hearing the perspective of someone like myself, someone who is not an expert, someone who's not a health and fitness guru or diet guru or what have you, is actually just being honest about the opposite. That it's not effortless, that it is effort, that it involves hard work and suffering and sacrifice. It's pretty common to hear people, verbally or on the internet, talking about feelings of guilt, that they feel guilty for not exercising, they feel guilty that they didn't go to the gym, they feel guilty that they're not getting exercise. For me personally, it's the opposite. I experience guilt that I do exercise. I experience guilt that I am spending time on physical fitness instead of studying, instead of learning something, doing something productive economically, instead of doing something with my daughter, I'm a divorced parent, instead of doing other things that I value more. And, if diet and exercise were just about vanity, I wouldn't do them at all. As you guys have probably heard me say before on this channel, ultimately, my reason for exercising in the way that I do is to be prepared for violence, for unexpected situations at any given time. It's part of an overall aesthetic of self-reliance and preparedness. It's not about personal beauty for me. But even so, I actually find it hard to justify the time and effort that goes into exercise. And it is true that it has negative impacts on my life outside of the time I'm at the gym. It is true that if you lift weights seriously, you do often enough go to sleep with a lot of physical pain, with aching in your muscles. It'll mess up your sleep cycle. It'll mess up your work cycle. It'll mess up the other things you're trying to do in the day. It can take a big chunk out of your adult life. If you go to the gym for 1 hour a day, 7 days a week, that's a huge commitment and a huge sacrifice. Now, by contrast, many people in my generation spend much more than 1 hour a day playing video games or watching movies or doing other things. So you can justify it to yourself to some extent by replacing those activities with exercise, or by doing it at the same time. You can work out while you watch TV, something I mentioned later on in this video. But that's just my disclaimer at the start of this video. Is there some value in getting the perspective of someone who is not an expert? I think the value is probably just in being upfront about the type of effort it is and the type of pragmatic, down-to-earth considerations we all have to make when we're not athletes and we're not experts, and when this is not the highest priority in our lives. It's not for me. In a video recently posted to this channel, I remarked that the best form of activism, political activism, is whatever sort of activism really fits into your daily life. If you can be honest with yourself, reflect on what you can and can't do in a day. This video is about the topic of diet and exercise. The best form of diet and exercise is whatever really fits into your life. It's very difficult, I think, for us to be honest with ourselves about that. Many people struggle with setting expectations for themselves they can't meet, setting goals or targets they can't live up to, and maybe embracing one ideal after another in terms of their diet, even if it's within a vegan diet. Now, I can throw up a selfie picture of the shape I'm currently in. I am not an athlete. I spend most of my time over a desk, whether that's been at the university, at whatever job I may have at the time, or, studying, researching, writing on my own. I am a book-bound, desk-bound intellectual, so I have no complaints about the physical shape that I'm in. For many people, the questions about diet and exercise the main question it comes down to is the number of hours in a day. To spend 1 hour at the gym is really a very serious sacrifice that many people can't make. If you can't go to the gym for 1 hour a day, if you can't go to the gym for 1 hour every second day, I think you really need to look at everything in your life and find a combination of sources of exercise that will work for you practically. About diet, I can put up here some video footage of what I actually eat in one day here in China. But the reality is, again, the solutions I've come up with living in France, Canada, Cambodia, Taiwan, living in different countries around the world at different times in my life, and having different jobs that took up the hours of the day in my life, I've come up with radically different solutions. At one point in my life, I'm divorced. Back when I was married, I remember my wife and I had a bread machine, an automatic bread maker. And it totally changed our diet, totally changed our daily habits. So we used to set the timer on the bread machine, wake up in the morning and have fresh baked bread. There was another very different time in my life when I bought a deep frying machine. Again, this is all vegan, and I used to on a daily basis make French fries for my wife, even though I myself do not really eat French fries. And I would make hummus from scratch. I would buy dried chickpeas and do the whole process, starting from dried chickpeas, of making hummus from scratch. But it was just during one period of my life in France that I did that. I never made hummus before that. I never made hummus when I was living in Canada before I was in France. And I think I've never made hummus after that. Like living here in China now, I don't buy chickpeas and make hummus. So there's one period of my life in which we made our own bread, albeit with a machine that automated the process, made it a lot simpler than making bread out of the oven. There was another time in my life when I made things like French fries and hummus myself. There have been many different times in my life in which I made pasta, like most vegans, chop up some garlic, chop up some tomatoes, make your own pasta sauce, etc., chop up some onions. But what I've eaten outside of the house, in terms of buying food other people make, in terms of cooking for myself, it has been totally, profoundly different. It's almost needless to say, in a country like Laos or Cambodia, you don't eat the same things that you eat in Saskatchewan. So it came up with radically different solutions. There have been times in my life when I had absolutely no access to a gym, and I had to come up with bizarre solutions for my own exercise also. When I first arrived in France, I had no exercise equipment, I had no access to a gym, and actually this happened several times in my life. I actually purchased really big bottles of water. I bought 6-liter bottles of water, and I would work out having one bottle in each hand. And I figured out all these different exercises I could do with 6 liters of water in each hand to try to simulate the kind of workout you might get at the gym. And of course, push-ups, doing push-ups with your feet elevated. This has often been the main form of exercise I could get when I had no access to a gym, no access to normal fitness equipment or what have you. I just didn't have those options. My point here is, I am not an athlete. I'm not trying to be an athlete. I think the vast majority of people watching this video who may or may not appreciate this advice or these reflections, you also are not athletes and are not planning to become athletes. So the kind of pragmatism you need to have, both in terms of the methods and means you're using, in terms of the food preparation you're doing, how many hours do you have to prepare food? You're not a professional chef. You're also not a professional athlete. How much exercise can you get? And what are the targets or goals you set for yourself? Women and men alike, I think, struggle with setting targets or goals that are aesthetic or emotional, how they want to look, how they want to feel. I think that's a bad target or goal to have. I think you should set targets or goals that are completely objective in terms of strength. So for myself, for many, many years, I've had a very simple target or goal. As long as I can do 200 push-ups and I can bench press 200 pounds, I'm happy. Now, here in China, we use kilograms. For me to lift 90 kilograms, 95 kilograms, this is approximately 200 pounds, is actually not that big a deal. I do that quite casually at the gym now. I do bench press 200, 210, what have you. I may get up to doing 220 with, equal ease. My point is not that this is a ceiling on how much I want to lift, but I never plan to lift 300 pounds. I'm not trying to inch my way up to 300. If I'm doing 200 comfortably, then I'm happy. Whether or not I once in a while am lifting 230 or something, the upper limit is not what I'm concerned about. But the point is that I can lift 200 pounds. Now, my own body weight, I don't think it's ever going to be below 200 pounds. So when I do push-ups, I do push-ups with my feet elevated, dramatically elevated, not slightly elevated, dramatically elevated, and with my feet flat, so there's almost no weight in my toes. I'm lifting a very large percentage of my body weight when I do push-ups. So given that my body weight is about 100 kilograms, it's not surprising, given the regularity of doing push-ups with that much body weight, that I would also be able to bench press more than 90 kilograms. So those are very reasonable, attainable goals for me, not just to reach. I've already reached them now. I've already surpassed them now, whatever you want to say. But for me to maintain over the long term. They're not based on how I look. They're not based on how I feel. They're not based on how much I weigh even. They're not. For me as a man, I do not really care about my body weight in terms of how much fat I'm carrying around with me. My main concern really is my capacity to cope with injury, to defend myself if violent situations arise, to be prepared at all times to deal with extreme situations that do come up as life goes on. And other than that, I'm concerned with wasting time. I don't want to waste time or money with preparing food, with consuming food. I don't want to waste time with exercise either. And that's one of the reasons why I tend to go for more brutal, simple workouts that get a lot done in 1 hour or in however much time you have. Coming back to France, I started off with just those 6-liter bottles of water and push-ups. I did order weights that eventually arrived, ordered on the internet some weights that I could use in my apartment. And that was many times in my life where I had no gym and where, I think for many people, the main opportunity you have to work out is when you otherwise would be listening to the radio, when you would be watching television. If you watch the television news for 45 minutes, that may be the only time you've got in the day when you could be lifting weights. So if you can get set up in a way where you watch the news or you watch this YouTube video now while you're lifting weights in your home, I think for many middle-aged people, those are the type of workouts you need to look into. You need to look into getting yourself an Olympic bar and disc weights and to be able to do basic powerlifting in the comfort of your own apartment, because when you include the travel time to and from a gym, I think the vast majority of people who have jobs and who have kids do not have the option of exercising in a gym. So when I was taking care of my newborn daughter, again, I'm now divorced, but during those long months, long sleepless nights, there were many, many times where I cradled my daughter in my arms, I rocked her to sleep, and then as soon as she fell asleep, as soon as she drifted off to sleep, I, came to the other end of the room. It was one big room. The crib was actually in the same room, and I was lifting weights at the other end of the room. And if my daughter woke up from her nap, woke up from her sleep, put down the weights, pick up my daughter, you juggle it this way. So whether it's your work schedule or your parenting schedule, the responsibilities you have in life, one of the things I've reflected on many times this channel is that it's rather sad, I think, that so many people try to model their lives after people who are on permanent vacation, people who have no jobs, no responsibilities, people who have many, many hours to spend worrying about their diet, worrying about food preparation, and also an unlimited amount of time to spend on both exercise and relaxation. For the vast majority of us, that is not useful at all. There is another guy who gives health advice here on YouTube called Joe Best. Many people criticize him because they point out that he's in worse shape than I am, in terms of his body fat and level of musculature, what have you. He's not a typical example of a health guru. But one of the things he says in his own defense, which I think is an interesting point, he says, if you want to learn about making money, don't ask someone who's born rich. Don't just ask someone who's skinny about how to manage your weight or how to exercise or what have you. You need to learn from people who've struggled with their weight. I would say instead you need to talk to people who struggle with circumstances similar to your own. When I was at the University of Victoria just a few months ago, it was a university in Canada, I actually got many questions about diet and exercise from my own professors. In a sense, that's smart. They're asking me not because I'm an expert. I'm not an expert. They're not asking me because I'm an athlete. I'm not an athlete. I'm not a paragon. I'm not some standard of unattainable health or well-being. But I was someone who was in many ways struggling with exactly the same schedule, the same grocery store, the same geography that they were. They went to work every day on that same campus where I went to work as a student. They're going to work there as a professor. So for me, as somebody, I'm 37 years old, they were looking at me and wondering, okay, how are you coping with all of these same factors? Now, a lot of them didn't like the advice I gave them. one of the best tips I had there in that climate and that circumstances for weight loss or for adding more exercise to your day was that when you walk to the university, which for me was a very, very long walk uphill, get a backpack and fill it with stones. You'd be amazed. You can get a wonderful workout with a backpack full of stones. What would just be a passive, low-impact exercise in your day can actually become a really serious source of exertion. You can really get a great workout that also, in my opinion, energizes you for all of the other exercise you do, push-ups or what have you, whatever other forms of exercise, weights or what have you. I think in every way, whether you fill up your backpack with a bunch of books you're not planning to read that day, or you manage to fill up your backpack with a bunch of stones, I think there are little ways that you can work more exercise into a hectic schedule. But what's interesting to me is that's exactly the kind of advice you're never going to get from a pro athlete. You're never going to get from someone who's on permanent vacation. That's the kind of advice you would only get from someone who's struggling with the same schedule and even the same geography, as where you work and where you live. So that's about it, guys. In many ways, what I have access to here in China, I eat green vegetables every day. I eat white rice every day. I eat a very kind of minimalistic diet. There's no way, for the vast majority of it, there's no way you could imitate it. If I moved back to Saskatchewan in Canada, there's no way I could eat the same stuff I'm eating now. There's no way I could even afford to spend the time preparing the dishes for myself that I'm currently eating. To take something like white cabbage and blanch it and prepare it, if you're cooking a meal for a group of people, you do that. When you live alone, you're not going to put in that much time and effort just to have a plate full of white cabbage. And I eat a lot of cabbage here in China. I eat a lot of cabbage, eat a lot of broccoli, what have you. So these are the minor miseries and obstacles that we all have to cope with in some kind of pragmatic, down-to-earth way.